Alright, me darlings. Well, we're going to tick off a big one in terms of review requests, that being the king of British sitcoms, the immortal, the influential, and the unforgettable...
Mrs. Brown's Boys.
You will burn in the fires of hell for saying that.
Already been there. Bit too clammy.
No, of course, I am talking about Blackadder.
Did that dog just say what I thought he said?
Wait, who's that?
Me!
And you are?
Benzamorey97?
Uh-huh.
The guy who drew and edited the comic dubs?
Are those even canon?
The guy whose Thunderbirds you crashed and had to have Joe cover your asses?
Oh yeah, now I remember you.
Hey, I remember you. You're the mailman who was in cahoots with my mom on April Fool's Day.
Oh yeah, you nearly gave us heart attacks.
Hey, it's not my fault Mrs. F was off by her dates. Her timing is about as reliable as AOL dial-up internet.
Anyway, why are you here?
Hello! You're reviewing Blackadder, one of my favourite shows. I'm joining you guys for it. Least you two can do after crashing my aircraft.
Very well. Blackadder started off as the brainchild of comedy writer Richard Curtis and comedian Rowan Atkinson, both of whom had just found success with their sketch series Not the 9 O'Clock News, which made them both famous. In response to the sudden surge of Shakespearean adaptations and costume historical dramas that started popping up a lot in the 70s and the early 80s on British television, they set out to make a parody of this formula by having a historical themed show but with no dignity, no grace, and tons of gags in it.
So basically Braveheart, but intentionally funny.
More or less. Hell, even the show's name was basically a parody of Poldark's name, both names of which sound like if a very posh person tried to come up with a porn name. Now of course, historical-based comedies were nothing new at this point. Chaplin did it, Monty Python did it, Dad's Army did it, but this one is hands down the most famous and beloved of them all, and let's have a look at why.
I'd say Monty Python is more famous.
As an overall franchise, yes, but Blackadder holds the crown in historical comedy.
Okay, if Monty Python is the grand champion of British historical comedy, Blackadder is the dark horse.
Don't you mean Dark Snake? They got started with a pilot in 1982, which didn't see the light of day for the public officially until 2023, and while it's certainly a primitive first effort, a lot of what the show would become came from this. Blackadder's scheming, dishonest nature, his perpetual bad luck, even the overall plot was reused for an episode of the first series. Eventually, the show did get started itself in 1983. I should point out that while this is technically an ongoing series, each individual series is classified as a mini-series due to its anthology nature. Each series is set in a different time period and has different sets of characters, though they mostly fit into similar roles as the previous ones, and each series has a different name. This was quite a unique thing for the time, since the British public was used to ongoing long-running sitcoms like Dad's Army, Last the Summer Wine, and so on, and this was right after the young ones came out, so the BBC sitcom boom was just about to start.
Cornflakes! Cornflakes! Cornflakes!
Where they made hundreds of sitcoms that only lasted about 1 or 2 seasons long, with a max of about 10 episodes. So the formula of the show presented here was a really different thing to what the public were used to, which is really impressive and brave to do.
Not to mention having it take place in a historical setting, and a story that's also inspired by the works of Shakespeare, two subjects in school that, let's be honest, many kids thought was extremely boring. Present company not included, of course.
But let's get started by looking at the first one, the Blackadder.
The history of the Blackadder.
This is the part of the series that is the least discussed and remembered. And is there a reason for that? Well, let's see if we can find out. For the time period, we have something that is never really tried again in the franchise. It's set in a theoretically alternate version of history.
First clever bit of history here. The show takes the mickey out of the orthodox history of the Tudors, in that they portrayed their predecessor, King Richard III, as a hunchback evil maniac who killed his nephews in the Tower. Yet in the show, he's nothing of the sort, and that he's effectively been stitched up to look bad, like a really mean lie told across Twitter. What makes it clever is that this is actually not far off from the archaeological history. For example, after his skeleton was found in a car park in 2017, they found that he wasn't deformed at all.
Oh, so he didn't kill his nephews in the tower?
Nah, it's more complicated than that.
I wasn't asking for historical reasons. I was asking to get some ideas for my own ambitions.
Wait, what? It's certainly a weird way to go, considering that besides the events of the first episode, they don't really utilise this premise much. Most of what happens in the following series could easily be things that happened in the court of Henry VIII. Even if the look of the series is meant to look more like the Middle Ages than the Tudor era, it still would have fit. But regardless of that, how does the show itself hold up? Well, the titular Blackadder here, who is the second-born son of King Richard IV, is very different from his successors, and even compared to how he was in the pilot, he's super weedy, slimy, cowardly, rather stupid, and totally pathetic.
12 months of chasing sheep and straightening the royal portraits, and now this. The bastard. The bastard!
I get the idea was to make a protagonist who felt like a parody reverse of the dashing young heroes of the period dramas at the time, but this wasn't the best way to go about it, especially since Prince Edmund's voice is horribly annoying.
Make love and be merry, for tomorrow you may catch some disgusting skin disease.
Rowan Atkinson has shown that he has a talent for doing voices, but this really isn't a good voice. But I give him credit that he really does his best to act as best as he can through this voice, and after a while you do start to see him as a character and not just an annoying voice. That being said, he is definitely the weak link in his family chain, and since most people were introduced to this franchise through the later series, this does tend to put people off. However, I would like to stress that the first series is still a good sitcom and has some great moments. For one, this is where many character archetypes in the series were introduced. The ever-faithful dungball Baldric, played by the legendary Tony Robinson, who, again, in contrast to his following family members, often shows himself to be smarter and more skilled than Edmund. In fact, most of the time, he's the one coming up with plans, and oftentimes they work. And when they don't, it's more from things that were totally out of his control.
They run all the way from this one, which is a pardon for talking with your mouth full, all the way up to this one, which is a pardon for anything whatsoever, including murder, adultery, or dismemberment of a close friend or relative.
And who's that signed by?
Both popes.
It's funny how over the generations Baldric's characters seem to get dumber and dumber, whilst Blackadder's go the other way down the ages. Evolution?
Then there's Lord Percy, played by Tim McInerney, and if you're unsure about how to pronounce his name, just think of it of how Percy is played by Tim Mac and Ernie. He's the sycophantic friend of Edmund, but represents more so the character that Baldric would become, but a lot more effeminate and silly as opposed to Baldric's deadpan delivery in later series. And while Tim would stay as a mainstay of the series to the very end, most of the characters he would go on to play were totally different, but this is where he got his start.
I said he shouldn't have burnt that cat.
Most of the other actors in the series never returned to the franchise. Elpsit Gray's Queen of Flanders, who I'll admit is an alright character, and Elpsit plays her very well and has some good moments.
I like the eunuchs.
I wish I owned one.
I wish I'd married one.
Prince Harry... No, not that one. This one's far more embarrassing. Played by Robert East, who is meant to be a satire of uber upper-class twits, and while it's funny at first, after a while his character can get a bit annoying in how naive he is and just rather irritatingly unflappable his manner can be.
I'm burning! Yes, but I think you're jolly glad of that cloak in the winter.
However, the one saving grace of this show is the one and only Brian Blessed as King Richard IV.
Blood! Death! War! Rampant
As I said before, he's basically playing this character as if he's playing Henry VIII, but really, who cares? He brings his bombastic, over-the-top energy that he brings to everything, and it is so much fun to watch.
Perhaps another man, equally weak-willed and feeble. Ha! There's no such man!
A word of advice. If you cross me now, or ever, I shall do unto you what God did unto the Sodomite.
Oh, my lord.
Even Tony Robinson himself in his own autobiography said that he was the saving grace of the first series. After all, having something loud, obnoxious and ginger has certainly made me stand out.
Hey!
Yeah, hey! That's an insult to Brian Blessed.
And despite the show being in its infancy, it had a really solid lineup of guest stars, such as Peter Cook as Richard III, which was probably the best casting in Blackadder history.
That was King Richard's seat. Would you insult his ghost?
Yes, find your own chair, you smelly little dog's pizzle.
And we also had Miriam Margolyes, Jim Broadbent, and Rick Mayall, all of whom would return in later series. And the funny thing is, anyone who has seen a lot of Richard Curtis's work knows that he's a great comedy writer, but he also is one of the most cliched writers of all time. He uses sitcom plots, character archetypes, and beats that have been used for hundreds of years.
Guess it's fitting that a historical sitcom has jokes that are ancient.
But yeah, if you've seen a lot of his work, you know what I mean. But weirdly, despite him being the primary writer here, and him being in his infancy, most of the plots and structures to the episode are very original and play to the historical theming, such as episodes about religion versus the crown, political marriages, and parodies of the Magnificent Seven. More on that later. This is also unique for the franchise, as it's the only time they ever did outside shots for some of the episodes, besides one or two standalone bits later on. And since this is pre-battery pack video cameras for the BBC, naturally all the outside scenes were filmed on film cameras rather than video, and it makes it look super jarring. This series also introduced its iconic theme song made by the legendary Howard Goodall, who has done more music for TV and movies than can be counted, and this is definitely some of his best work. And what's clever is that each series does the theme in a different way, with this one sounding like something from a classic BBC historical drama band, but with the ending version having lyrics, which is probably the best version out of the whole franchise.
The sound of hoofbeats cross the glade. Good folk, lock up your son and daughter.
So yeah, this was a shaky start to the series, but it's not without its merits, and it did start a lot of elements that became part of this series' formula, including having an epic series finale. Anyone who hates the first series has to admit the final episode was great, with Prince Edmund finally getting fed up with having the short end of the stick. He decides to form a band of unscrupulous, unrelenting, villainous cads to overthrow the king and rule the country themselves. It's a ton of fun and has a lot of great moments and characters in it, and has probably the darkest final moment of all the series, and it's awesome. So yeah, if you decide to skip this one, I don't blame you, but it's clearly not without its charm, and the one thing that can be agreed on is that it paved the way for something much better. In 1986, almost 3 years after the previous series,
Guess it took a while for the nightmares of the first series to go away.
we got Blackadder II, the follow-up series that is set in Elizabethan England, which Lord Blackadder, a nobleman and popular member of the Queen's court who will use any underhanded trick to get power, money, or just prove that he's the best. Sounds familiar, Huck? Richard Curtis returned as the writer, but now with a new partner, Ben Elton, having just come off of his own runaway success, the previously mentioned Young Ones. Ben is a writer of some divide, some saying he's a genius, and others saying he's a pompous, ego-driven dickhead who just happens to come up with some good one-liners every now and again.
Wasn't that the review of your last stand-up show?
Shut up. Regardless, it's undeniable that Ben has had a huge hand in giving us some of the best sitcoms of all time, and this is one of them.
Ego or not, his writing certainly helped to establish more what most people are familiar with in Blackadder. Whilst the first series was more focused on setting up the story, it did make the comedy take more a back seat. Not to mention the first series was considerably more expensive, so Ben Elton came in to trim the fat, you may say, both in terms of writing and production.
This is the show that established the fully fledged formula for the show going forward, that being Blackadder is incredibly smart, ruthless, and a total dick, but is also perpetually unlucky and often gets into sticky situations. Effectively, he represents the modern idea of a cynic in the old world. Even the way he talks and acts feels rather out of place with how his peers present themselves.
Beshrew me, Edmund, you're in good fooling this morning.
Don't say beshrew me, Percy, and these stupid actors say beshrew me.
It's like a modern day jerk getting displaced in time and just deciding to roll with it.
Now there's an idea for a future project for me to work on. I'll have to put my Foxy Firebomb on hold for now.
This is what makes the series so great, that it's the perfect formula for great one-liners, transplanting modern-day problems into historical settings, and just giving Rowan a chance to really show off how well he plays a lovable prick.
I've been in your service since I was 2.5, my lord.
Well, that must be why I'm so utterly sick of the sight of you.
Much like you, Huck.
Thanks, I guess.
Ah, yes. I remember being introduced to the show by my late dear grandfather. I remember the day I sat down with him, watching it, and I recall laughing my head off when we saw
For a good, hard shag.
Brought back some old memories for him, I'm sure.
Not all Blackadders are the same from this point on, and each one has their own little quirks. All Blackadders are liars, but this one takes particular pride in his ability to fib.
I consider myself one of England's finest liars. Oh my God, Percy. A giant hummingbird is about to eat your hat and cloak. Oh no! You see, I'm terrific.
Though this often results in his mouth writing checks that his arse can't pay. He's also a bit easier to trick than his future versions, and he's probably the most charming out of all the Blackadders.
Life without you was like a broken pencil.
Explain.
Pointless.
This is where Rowan Atkinson's genius really shines. Despite playing effectively the same character type, he has enough minor traits to distinguish between each series, which is much harder to do than you'd think. In some regard, it almost makes up for how his performance was in the first series, as you could make the argument that that was whom that particular Edmund was like, and over the generations his descendants mellowed out and get smarter. Though that's just me, though.
While the setups were no longer as original as the previous ones and tended to use pretty cliched ones like need a lot of money fast, being in two places at once and liar's karma, the way the characters are written and the fantastic one-liners makes it feel fresh, and for many this is the first time some of these formulas were introduced to them.
What we're talking about in, privy terms is the very latest in front wall fresh air orifices combined with a wide capacity gutter installation below.
You mean you crap out of the window?
That being said, there were a few things in this series that they hadn't quite perfected yet. For one, Rowan's voice as Lord Blackadder still had a bit of a lisp to it, and while it's not as distracting as the previous version's voice, it is noticeable.
If he comes begging again, tell him I shall report him to the Bishop of Bath and Wells, who drowns babies during christenings and eats them in the vestry afterwards.
Tony Robinson returns as Baldric, but is now unrecognisable with a beard. In fact, he actually looks quite handsome, I have to say. Beards are awesome. Wait, who wrote this?
Go watch the birdie.
Anyway, his character as a moron is now established, but Tony hasn't quite got the performance down right either, still mostly playing him the way he played the previous version, and that coupled with his more handsome features makes this Baldric seem a bit like he's got a split personality.
That Farrow bloke you executed today, you sure he's dead?
Well, I chopped his head off, that usually does the trick.
Yes, don't get clever with me, Baldric. I just thought he might have lopped off a leg or something by mistake.
No, the thing I chopped off had a nose.
Lord Percy also returns, though he's more or less identical to last time, so not much to say there. However, this series did introduce a few new actors who became staples of the franchise. The great Stephen Fry as Lord Chamberlain Melchett, who acts as the killjoy to Blackadder's schemes.
Oh, we all remember the shame and embarrassment of the visit of the King of Austria when Blackadder was found wandering naked among the corridors of Hampton Court singing I'm Merlin the Happy Pig.
And Miranda Richardson as Queen Elizabeth I, who is depicted in a childish, spoiled and exaggerated way.
I know why you want to get out of it, because I remember the last time you had a party. I found you face down in a puddle, wearing a pointy hat and singing a song about goblins.
Which, while it sounds stupid, it's not too unlike what Elizabeth became in her last days.
If this show was made 20 years later, I could easily see Helena Bonham Carter playing her.
There was also Patsy Byrne as Nursey, and while she never played any other characters in the series, her standalone character is a great one, and she has some of the best lines in the show.
And everyone shouted, "He's a boy, he's a boy." And then someone said, "But it hasn't got a winkle." God be praised, it's a miracle, a boy without a winkle.
And like the previous series, this one had some great guest stars, including the returning Margulies and Mayle, and also introducing Hugh Laurie into the franchise with two one-off characters, Gabrielle Glacier, who would return in Series 4, and the great Tom Baker as Redbeard, another minor character who makes a big impression.
You have a woman's bottom, my lady.
I'll wager that sweet round pair of peaches has never been forced twixt two splintered planks to plug a leak and save a ship.
Also, something I only found out recently, the baby-eating Bishop of Bath and Wells from the episode Money is played by Ronald Lacey, which is a name that may not have any meaning to most of you, until I tell you he also played this guy. That's right, these two were played by the same person. I never would have guessed that.
We feel about as shocked as his character was in Lost Ark when he opened the Ark. Oh hell no, we ain't get him demonetised showing that scene here.
Also, side note, the bishop's speech near the end of the episode about his nature is one of the quotes that really sums up my life.
am a colossal pervert. No form of sexual depravity is too low for me. Animal, vegetable, or mineral, I'll do anything to anything.
Animal?
Don't worry, Huck, you're safe there. I've got a different fox I knock boots with.
Don't remind me.
I will also say that while this series does look a lot cheaper than the previous, which used real locations for most of its filming, whereas this one is all done on sound stages, it does look a lot more colourful and memorable. So yeah, from the first stepping stone to a huge leapfrog into the first of one of the best sitcoms of all time. But this was only the beginning. This series introduces us to Mr. Blackadder Esquire, toadying butler to the Prince Regent George IV. Yep, another story of an intelligent jackass under the thumb of a dumb authority figure. Sound familiar, Huck?
Oh, shut up. I left so-called Lord Chester behind with a gift of mine.
My former footstool left a turd in the laundry basket. I was outraged. That's my poop patch.
This is where Rowan's performance as Blackadder was perfected here. In fact, I think this performance is the one that got him the role of Zazu in The Lion King.
The fact that I'm not a millionaire aristocrat with the sexual capacity of a rutting rhino is a constant niggle.
He'd make a very handsome throw rug.
Zazu.
And just think, whenever he gets dirty, you could take him out and beat him.
Imagine Zazu getting Mufasa to play a game of cards with him. Scar would be so jealous of such corruption.
How about a game of cards?
Excellent idea.
I'm surrounded by idiots.
This is also where Baldrick's performance was perfected, with his gormless look, his deliberately paced dialogue which makes him seem like he has to think about each word he's about to say before he says it.
Well, when I used to play in the gutter, I used to say to the other snipes, "Hello, my name's Baldrick," and they'd say, "Yes, we know, sod off, Baldrick."
Aw, reminds me of you first thing in the morning, and at noon, and the evening, and pretty much every time in between.
This series also gave us Hugh Laurie in his standout role for the series as the Prince Regent George IV, which, while his portrayal of the prince is pretty far from how even satire papers at the time depicted him as a corrupt, debauched party boy, the way Hugh plays the character is absolutely perfect for him, and it's one of his best roles as an actor.
Let's just damn the fellow's eyes, strip the breeches from his backside, and warm his heels to Putney Bridge. Hurrah! Good Lord, I mean, we're British, aren't we?
You're not, you're German.
Also, after seeing him in so many American productions doing serious roles, seeing him here makes it even more funny. Imagine House saying this.
Honestly, it wouldn't even be the most bizarre thing to happen in that show.
This series also featured new characters with Mrs. Miggins, who is played by Helen Atkinson Dowes, no relation to Rowan, who appears in nearly every episode as Blackadder's connection to the working class world and his white makeup plastered setup lady.
Still, I don't expect you'd know much about that, being only a little butler.
They do say, Mrs. M, that verbal insults hurt more than physical pain. They are, of course, wrong, as you will soon discover when I stick this toasting fork in your head.
She also has an arc having a love interest with Blackadder, to which Blackadder responds in the most delicate of ways.
And I'd always hoped that you'd settle down and marry me, and that together we might await that slither of tiny adders.
We were the last 3 humans on Earth. I'd be trying to start a family with Baldrick.
But it does conclude with another performance from Rowan Atkinson, Cousin MacAdder, Blackadder's mad Scottish relative. It's a minor role, but it's really impressive.
And what's in it for me? Enough cash to buy the Outer Hebrides. What do you think?
14 shillings and sixpence. Well, it's tempting. We must return to Scotland and you must fight her in the old Highland way. Bare-breasted and each carrying an 8-pound baby.
Oh, yes. I love babies.
Despite how popular and influential the series was, it strays really far behind from the scenes formula that the show had established at this point. Rick Mayall's not in it at all, Tim McInerney only appears in 1 episode, as does Stephen Fry and Miranda Richardson. Blackadder holds no real power anymore, and in the end, he ends up getting what he wants and turns his back on the other characters. And yet this series still turned out amazing. This series is so iconic, it even inadvertently spawned a rip-off to it in America called The Secret Diary portrait of Desmond Pfeiffer. The P isn't silent.
I know. I've heard the noise you make when you go to the bathroom.
Gross, Huck. This series is such a blatant ripoff of Blackadder III, it's pathetic. A smart, snooty British butler with a stupid sidekick and an egotistical master. Their primary sets are the kitchen basement and the master's quarters. It often involves doing satirical comedy relating to historical elements. I mean, it's exactly the same. Well, with one exception. It's not funny. And it's a shame too, because it had some good stars in it. Chi McBride, Captain Krager from Law and Order. These are good actors, and they try their best to make this material work, but they just have nothing to go on. Proof that Americans should stop stealing our shows and make their own, since it never works.
Wait, what about The Office?
Okay, that was alright.
And Ghosts US?
Yeah, that was okay too.
And what about...
Look, stop steamrolling my point, alright? This series did also get a few more guest appearances, such as Nigel Planer in one episode, Chris Barry in another, and the great Robbie Coltrane.
I should not lose the book, sir, and if any other man should, I would tear off his head with my bare hands and feed it to the cat!
Even Ben Elton himself made a cameo in one part.
Smash the spinning jenny! Burn the rolling Rosalind! Destroy the going up and down a bit and then moving along Gertrude! And death to the stupid prince who grows fat on our profits!
Egotistical prick inserting himself into his own show. What?
Look who's talking!
But while this may have seemed like the pinnacle for the series, as Jolston once said, you ain't seen nothing yet. And so we come to the last series in the lot, the iconic Blackadder Goes Forth, set in the First World War. In spite of it being a comedy, this show really did capture the feel of it being in the trenches in the First World War, to the point where the actual British Army used to show episodes from this for decades to entertain the men and lift their spirits. This is the only series where you truly sympathise for Blackadder, as you would anyone in this situation. Even the most contemptible person in the world didn't deserve to have the hell that the soldiers in the trenches went through happen to them. And while they didn't always address the class situation with how the officers had dugouts and more food compared to the privates from the working class, it does show the huge divide between reality and common sense of the troops compared to the extremely out of touch and deluded pencil pushers who stayed as far away from the fight as they could, and shows both in a funny but also poignant way just how terrible and tragically ultimately pointless the First World War was. And also, since having been to the Somme where these battles took place quite recently, and to see that after watching this, it's really amazing.
A shame you didn't stay. Living with you after you've had eggs is like surviving a gas attack.
Hush, here comes a whiz-bang indeed. This Blackadder overall is a bit of a departure from the previous. He's much less cruel and devious than his predecessors, though he's by no means nice. He's the first Blackadder line to break the tradition of having less and less social status with each new version, since being able to rise up to the rank of captain would mean, especially at this time, that he had noble bearing and breeding, since back then you really couldn't become an officer without having some prestige to your heritage. Not that it's that much different now in the British Army, to be honest. He's also probably the smartest of the Blackadders, coming up with a lot of very elaborate schemes, many of which do actually work, and the times where they don't, it's usually not his fault.
In fact, the situations Blackadder finds himself and his schemes to get out of them here now seem more oddly relatable. One example is in the episode Corporal Punishment, where Blackadder is court-martialed for shooting the Major's carrier pigeon, and he ends up in a trial like that of Wonderland. The judge is bitterly biased, and his defence counsel, in Baldrick and George, is about as effective as the Great Wall of China if it was made of papier-mâché. Whilst what he was doing was technically disobeying orders, you could also make the argument that he was just trying to survive in the war, and the madmen that are in charge of the war. More on that later.
The one episode that stands out to me, besides the finale, is the episode that begins with Blackadder mocking Charlie Chaplin and British Music Hall.
Chaplin is a genius.
He certainly is a genius, George. He invented a way of getting paid $1 million a year for wearing a pair of stupid trousers.
Both of which Rowan was not happy with from behind the scenes, since Chaplin is his comedic hero and he started his career in Music Hall. But Elton basically put it in just to piss him off. Sounds like something you'd do.
If I ever get my hands on your laptop, get ready to start dissing AC/DC like they're the Jonas Brothers in 2008.
Good luck with that. You'll never guess my password.
Oh, bollocks.
How did you guess?
Your mum told me.
This also introduces, finally, Adrian Edmondson into the series as the Red Baron, and he and Rick have an amazing scene together. Plus, with his inclusion and Nigel Planer in the previous, we got all of the truly original young ones in the series here.
How lucky you English are to find the toilet so amusing! For us, it is a mundane and functional item. For you, the basis of an entire culture.
Tim also makes a return with the new regular character of Captain Darling, and despite the silly joke with his name,
How dare you, darling?
I have to say this role really fits his style a lot more, being a stick-up-his-ass, snobby, weaselly killjoy who's always giving Blackadder a hard time.
Just doing my job, Blackadder. Obeying orders. And of course, having enormous fun into the bargain.
And Stephen also returns as a regular as the oblivious and crazy General Melchett in what is probably his most iconic performance in the series.
We've only got to look at him to see he's as sane as I am.
And the majority of the episodes again continue with classic sitcom setups like putting on a show, lying to get out of a situation, and a quick love affair, the latter of which also gets Miranda Richardson back for a much more grounded and serious performance which works really well for her, and they all come out great. This definitely has some of the best writing in the series, not the least of which comes to the finale, which, while it does take a more somber tone, both in making sure to convey the weight and tragedy of the First World War, but also in giving us a final farewell to these characters. And said finale could quite possibly be a contender for the best final episode of any series in history, not just for legit making a comedy like this want to make you cry and feeling like a true great send-off to these characters, but also in tying it to the horrors of the First World War was brilliant. It really deserved an award.
For a show that's so hell-bent on mocking historical events and figures, it's quite a tonal turnaround, but a fitting one at that. Keep in mind, when this series came out, World War I is still in living memory, and naturally, this is very sensitive territory. Even the writers admitted it was a difficult scene to pull off, as it could so easily have been taken the wrong way. It's still one of the most powerful scenes in comedy, though, I've ever seen, and it's no wonder when everyone brings up Blackadder, they think of this series in particular. It's a perfect ending to an already amazing series.
Overall, a great final note to send off on the series, but we've not quite covered everything in this franchise just yet.
He never gets on people's weak and doesn't laugh at toilet humor.
As with any popular British sitcom, the series had a bunch of specials made, the first being Blackadder, The Cavalier Years, which was a quick mini-episode that was set during the British Civil War and made for comic relief in 1988. No surprise that Richard Curtis had a Blackadder special made for comic relief, he basically invented both of those things. The special details Sir Blackadder in his attempt to hide the king from Oliver Cromwell's Roundhead army.
So was that an army led by people who all look like you?
Shut up. Despite being made for charity, they did not skimp on the writing, it's still as good as ever. Rowan more or less playing approximately a bridge between the second and third Blackadders in terms of performance.
How's the king, sir? About as comfortable as can be expected for a man who's spending the winter in a blackcurrant bush.
Baldrick being more or less the same he was in his third incarnation. Stephen Fry's performance as King Charles I in a satire of the, at the time, Prince Charles, who had become King Charles III, is brilliant, though admittedly it's not easy to tell that's who he's trying to represent at first. But the voice he does, and making a man who is about to face the chop seem like a dithering old fool who can't stop talking about himself, is hilarious.
But they will never find a man to execute you.
Well, you see, I find that absolutely tragic. You know, there are so many young people who would leap at a chance like that.
And as always, it has some really good one-liners and a hilarious ending.
Thank God you've come! Seize the royalist scum!
Not too much to say beyond that, but it's a great little extra bit for the franchise. And of course, being a British sitcom, there was a Christmas special. As with any big comedy show, of course they parody A Christmas Carol, but in a really clever twist, this time they have, instead of Blackadder being a jerk, his Victorian counterpart is kind, generous, and naive.
Strip away the outer layers of a fat git, and inside you'll probably find a thin git.
And when the Ghost of Christmas, as there's only one of them this time. Though, when I first watched this, I thought it was Hagrid given his entrance by knocking down a door, and he is played by Robbie Coltrane.
Well, it's a nice change from all these skinflints to that old fellow across the road.
Bags of money. I caught him trying to cut down on his heating bills by using his John Thomas as a draft excluder.
Also, when he was in Blackadder 3, he threatened to do the same thing.
Bring it out, sir! We shall break down the door!
Coltrane had a fetish for breaking down doors, it seems.
Once the switch happens and Blackadder lives up to his ancestors' standards, as the Ghost of Christmas inadvertently shows him that if he remains a nice person, his family line is doomed, but if he becomes a jerk, his family will end up ruling the universe. The put-downs and cold shoulders he gives to the people who took advantage of him at the start are legendary.
Utter crap.
This also gives us the return of Jim Broadbent, who we'd not seen since the first series, and Miriam as Queen Victoria and Prince Albert respectively.
What are you doing, Albert?
Nothing.
Oh, yes you are, you naughty German sausage.
Considering the role they played in the first series, I'd hate to imagine a fully translated sex scene with these two, but instead have it German to English.
Oh.
Wicked child!
I deserve that.
Then finally, in 1999, we got the TV movie Blackadder Back and Forth.
Surely it should be called Blackadder Back and Fifth.
The movie details the adventures of a modern-day Blackadder, Lord Blackadder V, in an attempt to con his friends by pretending Baldric has invented a time machine, and as it turns out, finding that it really does work and has a bunch of mini-adventures in different time periods, which results in some unfortunate outcomes for the present.
He sniffed my skin!
The dinosaurs were in fact wiped out by your parents.
Blackadder Back and Forth functions as, I suppose, a more happy ending to the franchise and the main characters, and it is nice to see Blackadder finally end up on top, and I don't think it lessens the impact of the final episode regardless. The movie itself does suffer from the people involved in the franchise clearly being a bit out of practice. It doesn't have the same punch and tone that the original run did. The more polished look really doesn't work, and also it was filmed without a live audience, which, while in broadcast it may not seem like a big deal since they edit the laughs back in, when filming, sitcoms that are not done in front of an audience tend to have the actors play much less to the audience and not be as funny. Look at Red Dwarf Series 7 for evidence of that. And I know you could argue that since this is meant to be more of a movie, a live audience wouldn't have worked, but it does seem odd for the franchise, similar to how Guest House Paradiso didn't have a live audience. That being said, there are still some great moments, such as a really funny bit with Robin Hood, the return of Miranda Richardson, Stephen Fry and Patsy Byrne as Queen Liz Melchett and Nursey respectively, and some bits in time periods that wouldn't have had enough material for a full series, such as the Battle of Waterloo, the Roman invasion, and the Dinosaur Age. Not the biggest bang for the franchise to go out on, but to say the least, it was a nice reunion for the cast and fun to watch regardless.
There was also, in 2023, a strange callback in the form of Baldric's bedtime story. A Red Nose Day skit in which Tony Robertson reprises his role as Baldric, who proceeds to tell a Jackanory-style tale. I won't spoil it, but it's a nice, if low-key, homage to the original series.
And unfortunately, when Baldric had taken off his shoe, the princess had taken one whiff of his rotting feet and instantly died.
If it's not been made clear from all the nonsense we've been wibbling on about, this is one of the greatest TV shows of all time. It launched the careers of countless stars, it inspired a whole generation of new comedy and comedians, and to this day, there's still nothing like it. There have been shows that took elements from it, but nothing quite like this ever came again. Horrible Histories got close, but you can't top the king.
That's the motto of my life, and don't you forget it.
If you're a king, I'm the king maker.
The only king you could make is Burger King, and a dodgy veggie one too.
Says Lord Chester's groom of the stool.
So, how are we gonna wrap up this one?
The same way we wrap up all our big reviews.
Me hiding in a busty woman's cleavage?
No, with a song.
The sound of tin bins hit the land. After a media discussion, beware the willow in his hand. Unless you want to have concussion, hark adder, a fox who's from the south. Hark adder, his mum's got quite a mouth. The sound of screams across the town. His bat is ready for a smacking. All the people's pants are brown, and soon the place will have a sacking. Hark Adder, more trouble than Guy Fawkes. Huck Adder, check out his mother's notes. Huck Adder, I thought George was his dad.